Hi there, this is Stefan Keston from grapplers.com. I just finished a late night workout and I'm jacked and it's hard to sleep. So I thought I'd talk to you about something that's been on my mind. And that is about separating your disciplines when you train. And I'm mostly going to talk about MMA just because it's really topical right now and there's some good examples there, but it applies to grappling in general and probably just about any sport that you do. So I often see guys, actually before I start, about half of you will find this totally obvious and go, duh, like of course I do that, of course I do that in my own training. And the other half might think that I have something here, so I'm talking to the second half of people. Let's take MMA. A lot of guys want to train MMA and all their sparring, they want to do MMA sparring. They put on the little gloves and they want to punch and kick and throw and do takedowns and do submissions and escapes and combine everything all together. Now, at its core, MMA is basically 3 or 4 disciplines. It's got punching or boxing, kickboxing. It's got wrestling, be that freestyle or Greco or maybe even judo, but it's got a takedown component. And it's got a ground component, which is typically Brazilian Jiu-jitsu. You might want to separate that out into ground and pound and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Now, I think there's a lot to be said for separating these disciplines and training them on separate days. And the funny thing is that most of the top MMA coaches and MMA fighters and MMA schools and teams agree with me. Most of them do full MMA sparring just a couple times a week, and some of them even, on one of those days, they'll do punches and kicks and takedowns and then stop on the ground and stand back up. And on the second day, they'll do punches and kicks and takedowns and keep going on the ground with strikes. Other schools will do full MMA a couple times a week. So what are they doing for the other 4 or 5 training days that they're doing? They're separating them. And I think there's some good reasons to separate it. Firstly, you get to find your weaknesses. Let's say you're a great puncher and you're always relying on your punching to get you out of trouble. If you're close to getting submitted, you punch your way out. If the guy's really pressuring you with the takedowns, you punch him. You can then fail to develop in those other areas. Whereas if you force yourself to go and just wrestle, and just do submissions, and just do ground and pound, you'll work on your weak areas, and your fastest development comes from working on your weakest areas. Another good reason to separate your disciplines is that you can find a higher caliber of sparring partners. Take a look at Georges St. Pierre, for example. If he only fought with MMA fighters at his level in training, he wouldn't have very many training partners, maybe 2-3 guys in the world, maybe. So he separates it. He goes boxes with pro boxers, and they push him, I'm sure. And he goes wrestles with elite wrestling clubs and with the Canadian Olympic wrestling team. And he goes and makes sure that he does Brazilian Jiu-jitsu with Brazilian Jiu-jitsu black belts in various locations. So by training those separate things, he's bringing his caliber of competition, sparring competition, higher. And that way he ensures that he's being pushed. And probably another good reason to separate the disciplines is it just keeps everything a little bit more predictable and a little bit more under control, and that means less injuries. So when you're just boxing, you're going to take boxing precautions. You're going to grease up your nose, you're going to put on headgear maybe, you're going to wear big gloves. And that basically, by staying within the boxing modality, the chances of having some freak accident are less. Same thing when you go and do submission grappling. Now you kind of know what you're in for, and the odds of something completely unexpected happening are less. I'm not saying you're not going to get injured, but it probably reduces the chance of injury. So those are 3 good reasons to train your sports or your disciplines of a sport separately. It's not only true for MMA. Take baseball. Do baseball players, to prepare, they got a big game on Saturday, do they play a baseball game on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to train? Or do they have batting practice and pitching practice and catching practice and talk strategy? Of course they do. They separate it. a decathlete doing the decathlon, 10 sports. Does that mean every day that he goes out to get ready for the Olympics, he does javelin and high jump and 400 meters and 100 meters? Of course not. He might work on his javelin technique for a day or a whole week while doing some generalized conditioning, and then the next week or the next day, he might work on his high jump and on his sprint starting technique. He separates it as well, and so should we. So when it comes to straight jiu-jitsu or straight submission grappling, there's areas within there. You've got submissions, specific submissions. You might just want to work on an armbar. You've got submission defense. You've got positions, maintaining them, position escapes, guard passing, preventing guard passes, takedowns. So you've got a long list of things to work on in isolation. So I'm not going to tell you what your ratio should be. It depends a little bit on what you want to get out of it and what you enjoy. And sometimes you might just want to roll and see what happens. And if you get submitted, you keep on going, and now you're going to pin your opponent and he gets to work on his position escapes, and it's a very free-form flow. And some days you might want to pick an area and just beat that area to death, or work on nothing but an armbar for a whole week. That's up to you. For me, I'm probably about 50-50 of just free flow or picking an area that I want to work on. So just to reiterate, you should spend some of your time working just on the individual disciplines of whatever sport or art you're working on, and some of your time working on everything together, and you'll probably make your fastest progress as a martial artist and as a grappler that way.